It's David here. Welcome to the mini course. Let me just get things organized here. There we go. Whoops, there we go. So this is the mini course on how to write an awesome short story. Whether you've written one before or not does not matter. Welcome here, and thanks again for signing up to the Ottawa Writing Workshops mailing list. That's great. This is me on the looking all serious and aloof, as you can tell, and then another time I was in with some of my science fiction students, and actually in that episode, I was about to start a lecture on how to make a tinfoil hat of all things. But anyway, let's get on with the course. So, what is a short story? Short story is between 1,250 and say 10,000 words. These are not hard and fixed rules, of course, but these are the general guidelines. My sweet spot for a short story is anywhere between 3,500 and 5,000 words. So for me, that's probably about 5 to 10 hours of writing, a rough draft, and then there's the revision as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So what we're going to cover in the mini course is how to shape a story idea, get some interesting characters, how to plot so that you know where you're going at all times, how to start and end your story and write with intention, create some dialogue and write effectively in sections. What we're going to focus on today is simply getting started. At the end of this mini course, I know your writing will be better. You'll have completed a short story ready for publication if that's what you're looking for. And you'll also benefit from the community of writers that are part of the Ottawa Writing Workshops. So let's get started. Let's get writing. I want you to think for a moment about what frightens you the most about writing. I can tell you this, that all of us at one point or another are afraid of writing, and usually it comes down to the following. It comes down to the fear of putting your work out there, having it judged, and then having people laugh at you and say, "What, you think you're a writer?" It's part of the amygdala, the lizard brain that we all have, the part of the brain that tells us when to run at night if we hear strange sounds. You know, it's the primitive brain. But it also gets in our way when we want to be creative, because we think, oh my goodness, the fear of putting something out there and actually having other people look at it is terrifying. So how do we overcome fear? The best way I know of overcoming fear is to not care about the outcome. It's not to get invested in whether you're writing a great short story or not. It's just to write. Just go ahead and write. And then surround yourself with other writers who are in a similar position, because we've all been there. So this is perhaps the best thing you can do is to find a community to hang around with, where you can share your story ideas in a supportive way. That really is the easiest way to overcome this fear of being judged and being laughed at. So it's sometimes not easy, I can tell you that. But once you get used to it, of not listening to that lizard brain in your head, you can accomplish all kinds of great, wonderful things. And then you might even be able to put your short story into a publication. This is one that a group of workshop participants put together in 2018, a collection of short stories. And writers who had never written before, we came together in a workshop, and I worked with them, and the result was this collection of stories that you can find on Amazon if you're so interested. So let's take a second and look at what makes a story effective. So you know, when you read a good story or you watch a good show on television or a movie, you know intuitively what makes a story really, really good. You've got some interesting characters in interesting circumstances. Normally these characters will have to overcome some major obstacle in order to achieve what they're looking for. So they run into all kinds of problems along the way. And ultimately they either succeed at the end, which is a success and everyone cheers and they're the hero, or they fail at the end, which means there's a tragic element to it. But in any event, the story itself is satisfying. And as consumers of stories, whether we're readers or whether we're viewers, What we're looking for is in exchange for several hours of our time, we're looking to be entertained, perhaps learn a few things along the way. And that's really what that's the exchange, that's the contract that goes on. So what we want to do as writers is we want to make sure that our readers are entertained and informed and satisfied at the end of the reading experience. So we need to focus on fast-turning scenes, quick plotting, interesting developments, interesting and compelling characters, and that sort of stuff. So I like The Quest. The Quest is an ancient way of telling stories that has been around forever and in all kinds of cultures around the world. The Quest, the hero's journey. You may have heard this. If you haven't heard it, then all you need to do is watch Shrek and you'll actually see the Quest in action. What we have is our hero who has a lot of good traits, but also maybe one or two fairly serious flaws. And they are pushed out of their nice, comfortable environment by some kind of inciting incident, and they have to go off out into the world on a quest for something. And it might be a quest for rings, or it might be, in this case, a quest to rescue Fiona so Shrek can get his swamp back, or it might be a quest for the Holy Grail, whatever it might be. Off you go on the quest. And along the way, you might pick up a sidekick, a helper. You might run into some wise people who can give you advice. But you're also going to run into lots and lots of obstacles. And these are the things that are so important in a story because they increase the amount of tension. Like how is Shrek going to rescue Fiona when she's in a castle with a dragon surrounded by a boiling lake of molten lava? That kind of thing. So that's what builds tension. That's what keeps the reader's interest. So in the short story that you're going to write, we're going to look at it in terms of a quest. So here's the hero's journey, and you can see this is a little bit easier to see. So here's our hero starting off with a call to adventure, right? Have to go, get your swamp back, whatever it might be, meeting a mentor, crossing the threshold into the unknown world. Trials and failure, those are the big ones. Develop some new skills along the way. There's a death to the old life and a rebirth in a new life. There are revelations and changes and atonement and so on. And finally, they return at the end a changed person. So this is what we'll be following in our short story. So what this means for us as writers, think of your story as a quest, which in fact you can think of your own life as a quest. Where your lead character leaves the comfort of their home in search of a goal and encountering numerous obstacles along the way. So let's take a second. You can pause the video right here and do this little exercise. It's really simple. It's fill in the blanks. It won't take long at all. So what is this? This is when I was younger, I wanted to do something, or I wanted to be something. So think back when you were younger and what you wanted. So maybe you wanted to become a geologist, like I did, or maybe you wanted to become a professional athlete, or a teacher, or a doctor, or a nurse, or whatever it might be. Think about that, and then just follow the pattern. So when I was young, I wanted to be a doctor. To do this, or to get this, these are all the things I had to do. I had to get good grades in school, I had to do this, I had to do that. But then I found out I wasn't very good at anatomy, so that didn't help. But I found a teacher who helped me, and so on and so forth. And you just fill in the blanks as you go along. And by all means, if you want to write more in each one of these little bullet sections, go ahead. This is your story here. So take a minute now and fill in the blanks, and let's see what happens. Okay, well, you may have guessed this already, but congratulations, you've just written a story with all the key aspects of a great quest story and great storytelling. You've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. You've set a goal, at least one, so you set out on a quest to achieve that goal. You run into problems along the way. You overcome them, and you either achieve it or you don't. But in any event, you are now a changed person, and that is essentially what great storytelling is all about. Now I have a random rule of 10. This is my random rule. It's loosely based on Malcolm Gladwell's rule of 10,000 hours in order to get good at anything. So this is my rule of 10 for short story writing. One of the problems that we have as writers is we want our first story to be the best thing ever. We want it to be as good as a Stephen King story or a Margaret Atwood story or what have you. And so we spend a lot of time agonizing over every word and over every little plot point. It can drive you crazy. My view is there's no way you're going to write that well until you've written a lot. And really, in my own world, what I follow is this: that I need to write 1,000,000 words of prose before I'm going to get really good at it. So that's my own quest. But for us, with short stories, here's my random rule of 10. The first 9 stories that you write won't be as good as those from established writers. But that 10th story is starting to get really good now because you've got experience, you know how to write, you know how to plot, you're learning how to revise, you're learning how to make interesting characters. All of these take time. There are no shortcuts to any of them. So the only way you can become a better writer is to write. So if I told you that your 10th story is going to be really good, but you have to write the first 9 in order to get there, what would you do? Well, you'd want to write the first 9 stories as quickly as you can, get them out of the way, because you know the 10th one's going to be pretty awesome. And so that's what I focus on. Just write stories. Write them, revise them, put them away, and then on to the next one, and just keep going that way. As Ernest Hemingway said, the first draft of anything is crappy. So, and he'd be. I mean, if he says that, and he often admitted that his first drafts of things were really bad. And that the actual writing and crafting comes more in the revision. So he would know. But it's important for us in writing our stories to focus on getting that story out in its entirety. So that means starting from the beginning and moving through the middle and ending in a satisfying way for the reader. Then we can go back and revise it and check our spelling and our grammar and put in some nice juicy words and fix little plot twists if we need to and all that other stuff that comes later. But unless you've got a full story to work with, the rest of it becomes, for me, moot. Okay, so here's a simple yet powerful story structure. So if you want to get started on a story and you really don't know where to begin, this is where you begin. It's a 5-section or a 5-scene template that I use, and you've got the link in your email that welcomed you to download the template in MS Word so you can use it. But this is a structure that's guaranteed to work every time. You'll have a lead character, a hero. You'll have an antagonist. You're going to create tension through obstacles, and you're going to finish in a satisfying way. So that's what we're going to focus on. Now, creating tension, this is the heart of a good story. Oh, by the way, so just going back to this, so you can download it and work your way through it, and we'll talk more about that in the next video that comes later. But for now, just have a look at it and see what it looks like. So this brings us to creating tension, which is the heart of any good story. If there's no tension in the story, I often say, then there is no story. It just becomes a boring expression of words. So wherever we can, we want to build tension into the story. Compelling characters, yes, of course. Your reader must be able to empathize, easy for me to say, with your lead character. If not, again, your story is doomed. So your lead character must have some interesting traits, but also some flaws. They can't just be all good, and your bad guys can't be all bad. They've got to have a little bit of both as we go along. So the question becomes, well, how do you actually create a compelling character like this? Well, they need some good traits. They like being honest and loyal and caring and so on, but they also need a flaw. So perhaps they're selfish. Perhaps they have a temper. Perhaps they cheat or they lie. These help to balance all of the other things, and this is what makes a character really compelling. And if you're not sure of that, I mean, just look at what George R.R. Martin does with Game of Thrones characters, for example. So yes, you can make a list of those. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Now, there's also another thing we can look at, and those are character archetypes. These are archetypes that exist, again, in all cultures throughout the world and throughout all time. So there's no need to reinvent anything here. Pick characters that we all love to begin with. So, for example, like a caregiver is a nurse or a doctor. That's why, you see so many shows on TV with nurses and doctors. Why is that? Because we love them. right? We love that sense of caring, the caregiver. The Maverick is like a Han Solo type. A wise old mentor could be Obi-Wan, or it could be Yoda. Voice of reason could be Spock. Our hero could be Captain Kirk. Our villain could be a Klingon. So you get the idea through this. So have a look at the archetypes and actually pick a character type and run with them. And I've got some examples here, so of mentor, which I just talked about here. So an ally might be Chewbacca. A herald is someone who brings a message from the unknown, like Dobby or R2D2. You can go through this and stop the video anytime to have a look at those ones if you like. And now we're going to get into writing and scenes. So a lot of authors do that. A. Van Vogt was one. But there's literally thousands of writers who write in scenes or sections, and each little scene or section can be anywhere from, say, 250 to 1,000 words, and you get to choose that. So if you want a really short story, and if you've got 5 sections, and each one has 250 words in it, you've got yourself a 1,250 word story, right? So again, have a look at your template. And we'll see what that looks like. And so finally, how do we get story ideas? Well, where do they come from? Where do authors, writers come up with these great stories? Well, for me, I get a lot of my ideas right from the headlines. So I'll surf the net, and I'll go to the news sites, and I'll go to the offbeat ones that have maybe science and technology, or maybe some interesting social things, and I'll look at the headlines. And then I'll ask myself one question: what if? And so it's the what if, or suppose, that prompts me to take an idea from a headline and build on it. And that's really where these ideas come from. So we get to focus on the creative aspect of writing when we're generating these story ideas, and we can just let the imagination run wild. So the only thing to keep in mind, though, of course, is that your lead character has to experience a crisis that's big enough that's going to push them out of their comfort zone and set them off on a quest. If not, they've got no reason to leave their lazy boy. So we want to push them out of that and get them on the road. So this is what I do when I come up with story ideas. I use this little equation. It's like real math in writing. So you have a lead plus a descriptor plus a crisis and a conflict, and it looks like this. So suppose a middle-aged English teacher, that's my lead, with a passion for astronomy that describes him, hears an alien distress signal from distant stars, that's the crisis, and must convince a nervous world to contact him. That's the conflict, because some will and some won't. So in that little synopsis, I have a story. Okay, here's another one. Suppose a stay-at-home mom who loves solving mysteries witnesses a stranger lurking around a neighbor's garden just before she goes missing, and must convince a skeptical gumshoe police chief to investigate a possible homicide. There we have a nice little Jessica Fletcher murder mystery. Or suppose Luke Skywalker, a bored teenager on Tatooine, discovers his family killed by evil stormtroopers, so he decides to become a Jedi rebel and avenge their deaths. Okay, so there we have the basis of Star Wars: A New Hope. So this is the idea. If you can't compose your story idea like this, then you really don't have a complete story idea. And I encourage you to do this before you do too much else. Okay, so here's your challenge, and we'll look at the 5-step template in just a second. So here's the challenge. Sketch out some traits for lead character. Use the 5-scene template to outline a story, but don't whether it's good or not. Don't worry about whether it's good or not. And don't actually do any of the writing yet. Just kind of map it out. So you have a story idea with your lead and your descriptor and your crisis. So now take the template and map it out. So what would happen in scene 1? Well, maybe Shrek's hanging around his swamp, and all of a sudden there's all these creatures that show up, as an example. And so just kind of map it out like that in bullet point form. And then when we meet the next time, we'll be looking at actually how to write that into a good story. Okay, we'll see you on the next one. All right, so here's the short story template I've been talking about a couple of times, and you can download this from the website. So the way it's set up in this one, we have 5 scenes altogether, and we begin with our main character, our hero. We show them leading a normal life, doing whatever they normally do, when a major crisis hits. Now, the major crisis doesn't have to be like a heart attack or an asteroid hitting the city. It could be any event that is big enough and important enough that's going to push our lead character out into the great unknown on a quest. So the first thing that happens then is this big crisis hits. Now our lead character then is going to react to it. The first way they're going to react is emotionally. It's like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? It's the end of the world as we know it. But then they'll think about it for a bit, and the rational side will take over. It's like, okay, calm down. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to solve this mystery, or to find this killer, or whatever it might be. And so they set off on a quest, the story goal. I'm the one who's going to avenge the death of my parents, or I'm the one who's going to figure out who stole the money from the bank, whatever it might be. Okay? So then in our third section, we have a smaller goal. So like your goal might be to solve the crime, but before you do that, you might want to find someone to help you, like a detective or your neighbor or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or like whatever it might be. And so that becomes the shorter interim goal. Now, these are obstacles. This is where the obstacle comes in. We never want to make it easy for our hero to do stuff. So we're always throwing obstacles in the way. This could be things like, oh, they tried calling someone, but they weren't home. Or they went to find the detective and there was no one available and the police chief chased them out. Or they heard that there was someone looking for work, but they couldn't find them. All of these sorts of obstacles that get in the way that make it difficult for our hero to achieve anything. The next section, section 4, is exactly the same, except now we've got a different goal. We're trying something else. And in the 5th section, okay, when everything else doesn't work, now we're going to try this one last thing. And hopefully we'll succeed, but if not, we fail, and that kind of takes over what we're doing here. So after trying everything else, the hero changes and overcomes their flaw to either achieve the quest or fail. So just a couple of notes here before I go. If you want to make a story longer, just add more sections. So just add them in here, between 3 and 4 if you want. Make sure that your heroes try the easy things first, because that's what humans do, is we often, we'll try to do something the simplest way first before we actually have to change, right? Now your antagonist, the bad guy, whoever that is also in your story, so they're not ignored. So be sure to include your antagonist winning when your hero is losing, because that creates even more tension. Now, just in terms of viewpoint character, so we're writing in third person limited, which means that everything that the character sees, that's what the reader sees as well. So there's no God mode, third person omniscient narrator here. So everything is through the eyes of the hero. And if you actually have a lot of sections in here, you might want to make your antagonist have their own section as well. Show them in their cave, working on their device that's going to destroy the planet or whatever it might be. So those are the sections then in the short story template.